Welcome back to part 3 of my abuse story. This video is going to be about how things got really pretty bad, and it was evident that I was in an abusive relationship. I'm going to say that this video should have a trigger warning. There's going to be a little bit of a discussion of violence. Not too much in this video, but kind of how things first became physical. Although, as I always say, verbal and psychological abuse is as bad and can honestly be worse than physical violence. It just messes with your head a lot. So it's still abuse, even if it's not physical. Anyway, we're gonna get into it. So this is still pretty early on in our relationship. This is towards the end of the fall semester of my senior year. We've still only been dating about 6 months or so. And we get married. I don't really want to talk about this because, wow, was this a stupid, misguided decision, but in consideration of transparency and being open and honest about this, I'm going to tell you guys why we got married. So, if you remember, fall semester, my 2 best girlfriends are both abroad. I would have lived with them. Things probably would have turned out differently had that been the case. But they weren't there. I didn't know other girls quite so well. And so I roomed with, a bunch of random girls that I didn't know. And I made sure that I got there early and I got my own single bedroom within a larger dorm. Now, in the month of August, my boyfriend was staying with me at the apartment my friend and I were subletting. This is because she went back home to spend time with her family in August because she was about to go abroad. My boyfriend didn't really like the place that he was renting, and he was doing a month-to-month lease, and he was like, hey, I'll just come help you out with the rent this month, and we can kind of play house, which is cute, right? So end of August comes, I need to move into my dorm room. He is supposed to find a new place for himself to live, and he's just not really doing it. And he says he's just not finding some place that he likes. I'm like, well, you can stay with me in my dorm for a couple weeks while you really look for a place to live. That's not a big deal. So he comes into my dorm with me and just never finds a place. And things get tense in a very small room with only a twin bed to sleep in. It's not very good, and we argue a lot. But to me, I just felt like it was kind of regular tension that might exist in a relationship, especially one that's confined in such close quarters. And I really blame the living situation on us not getting along quite as well as we could. So I'm urging him to find his own place, but he quit the job that he had, and he doesn't have money, and it's just like, So I have the idea that we get an apartment together, because when we lived together in August, it was awesome. We had such a good time. So it should be like that again, right? The problem is that when you stay in a dorm, it's like you signed a lease for the duration of the school year. You can't just break that lease for no reason. So when I find this out, I tell him like, hey, it's kind of disappointing. I guess we won't be able to get an apartment together, but you should definitely find your own place. He's like, well, we could if we got married. Then you would be allowed to get out of your dorm. I'm like, well, that's true, obviously, and I would love to marry you in the future, but why would we rush into it? There's no need to get married right now. And he's like, if you would marry me in the future, why wouldn't you marry me now? What's the difference? Do you not actually want to marry me? Is it, and remember, I'm isolated. I've already been kind of indoctrinated for a few months now. And I like to describe it as a dare that turns into a double dare that turns into a triple dog dare, and things just kind of escalate and snowball out of control, and before I know it, we're at a courthouse getting married. Really, nothing else I can say about it. So we get married, and we get an apartment. We don't tell anyone that we got married, which is, suspicious, right? If it was like so important that we get married, why is it a secret? But our families know that we get an apartment together. They think it's just like, we didn't have to do anything crazy to get that apartment. And, I think things are going to get better. But they don't. They get worse. So much worse. The yelling just increases. He's always angry at me for anything, like breathing. I was yelled at for breathing frequently. That's a sentence I can say. I was afraid to breathe too loudly. I am not kidding you. And eating too loudly. I am not kidding. And when you're really hungry, so I would come back from class and I would be starving and I just, kind of want to shovel food into my mouth. And I know that he would yell at me if I ate too loudly or chewed too loudly. And I would try to go eat in the bathroom so I could eat in peace. And I would get yelled at for not eating in front of him. And then I would eat in front of him and get yelled at for eating in front of him. Can you understand? Things are getting a bit crazy. But still, I don't think that it's abusive. I just don't. I just think, we're having some couple issues. And this is exacerbated by the fact that I now suspect that he's cheating on me. I'm just going to tell you, if you think you're being slick, cheating on your partner, you're not. You're not. They're going to pick up on it, and they're going to find out you're not slick. What he started doing was being very protective over his cell phone all of a sudden. He would always place it screen down, and he would often put his phone down on the other side of the room, face down, for no reason. Weird, right? I'm just observing this. I don't want to be a crazy girl, right? Some psychopath. I'm not trying to get yelled at here. One evening, he's sitting down, thumbs flying, and he's got this stupid smirk on his face. So I'm watching this. I'm like, hey, what's so funny? Keeps going, and he leans back. He says, oh, just trapezius exercises. He leans back, so I obviously can't see his screen. Trapezius exercises, that's so? Stupid smirk. Yeah, they're funny. This dude's lying to me. Okay. Maybe a few days later, He passes out asleep pretty early. I'm up. It's not really that late. It's maybe 11 p.m. I'm on my laptop either doing schoolwork or applying for jobs. And as I'm sitting there, I hear a doot-to-doo on his phone indicating that he just received a text message. His phone, of course, is across the room, face down on a bookshelf. So I'm sitting there and I'm trying to continue concentrating on work. And I keep looking over the phone. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be that person to go through my partner's phone, but the dude's obviously lying to me and I just need to know. So I get up, look at his phone. Message is from some girl's name. I either knew the password or he didn't have a password on his phone. So I open it, I look at the text message exchange. I can't even read the whole thing. I just look at it and it is obviously inappropriate. It was something like he texted her that he can't wait to see her again, and she wrote LOL like 10 times in a row and said me neither, and I died inside. I don't know if you've ever been cheated on before, but when you find out about it, it's a very physical reaction. Like my heart started racing, I got lightheaded, I had difficulty breathing, I was like having a panic attack. I couldn't believe it. I just married this dude. He just convinced me to marry him, and he's obviously having some kind of inappropriate relationship. I can't even scroll up in this conversation to see just how inappropriate it is. I am freaking out and I need answers. So I go over to him. I sit down on the bed next to him and I tap his shoulder and I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. So he wakes up and I turn his phone and face it towards him and I say, what is this? And he kind of, picks his head up, blinking, bleary-eyed, trying to focus on the phone screen to figure out what it is that I'm showing him. And I'm watching him process and realize what he's looking at. I see the gears turning in his head, and he just turns to me. He says, why would you wake me up? Well, that's not the response I was expecting. I say, what? And he's like, why would you wake me up like that? And he pushes me. I cannot believe that this is the response. I am in complete shock that I just fall backwards off the bed, hit my head hard on the floor. But bless my soul, I think this is obviously an accident, and he's probably concerned that I just hit my head really hard. So I pop up immediately, and I start repeating, I'm okay, don't worry, I'm okay, as I rub the back of my head. But he doesn't care. He's already out of the bed. He's at the dresser, grabs his keys, puts on his shoes, and walks out the door, and I'm still standing there in the middle of the room, rubbing my head, repeating that I'm okay. All of this transpired in the space of about 3 minutes. I can't believe that I just found out that I was being cheated on, most likely. I ask him about it. He gets angry at me for waking him up, and then I now have a huge bump on the back of my head. What? I get into the bed, curl up in the fetal position, and I start bawling my eyes out. I just can't handle what is going on. About 20-30 minutes later, he comes back in the apartment. He lies down in the bed next to me, and I rub my head. I say, my head really hurts. He says, oh, I thought you were okay. You said you were okay. True. He's like, you can't wake someone up like that all frantically. I wasn't frantic. I could have fucking slapped that motherfucker in the face, and that's how I could have woken him up. But I didn't. I tapped him on his shoulder and asked him what it was. But you know what I did? I apologized. Because I just can't even, I am just like, it's just so absurd that my brain isn't processing it. And I'm just like, oh, I'm sorry. You're right. That isn't how I should have woken you up. And we go to sleep. The next day, I'm by myself in the apartment, and things just aren't sitting well with me. Me hitting my head and getting a bump on it was unintended, but he never should have shoved me in the first place. For the first time, I think, am I in an abusive relationship? So I get on my laptop, Google domestic abuse. I open a page and it has a bulleted list of signs that you are in an abusive relationship, and absolutely every point correlates to our relationship. The only thing that doesn't match up is that he was never sexually abusive to me, and the bits about being physically abusive, it just didn't really match up. And even though I saw that the majority of the list described our relationship to a T, I feel as a society, or at least for me, I associate abuse and domestic abuse with, battered women who have black eyes, that they wear sunglasses all the time to try to cover it up, and heavy makeup, and, it's a very physical thing. I don't really think about abuse, at least at the time, obviously, I didn't think about it as being, a lot of controlling, manipulative behavior, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, just being an awful person. I was confused. I had questions. I wasn't sure. I didn't have my friends. Even though they were back at this point, this was January, my senior year of college, they were back from being abroad. I now lived off campus, and, senior year, people are applying for jobs. They're doing their own thing. I canceled hanging out with them a bunch of times because I just didn't want to deal with the argument with my now husband. So they kind of just stopped hanging out with me. And as I said in my previous video, my parents and my family, they weren't really a resource for me. But on the website that I'm on, there is a button for a live chat, kind of like a hotline. So I'm like, oh, let me ask. Let me figure this out. So I click on it, opens up. Person says, like, hi, how can I help you? If this is a life-threatening emergency, please call 911, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so I think that I might be in an abusive relationship, but I'm not really sure. So I have some questions. I don't remember what the exact response was, but it was something along the lines of, this is a very busy hotline, can you get to the point, kind of a thing. And when I read that, I think immediately in my head of women who have children that are being brutally beaten, and that's not me. That's not the situation I'm in. I have a little bump on the back of my head. It's not a big deal. It was an accident. How dare I use up resources from someone who actually needs help? I'm being ridiculous right now, and I X out of that chat screen. And this was another coincidental moment that really probably changed the course of a lot of things. I was like, I'll figure it out. It's fine. This was an accident. It was not a big deal. I think think it was about a week later, I was pushed up against the wall with his hand around my throat, choking me. And I was like, yeah, this is abusive. This is abusive. So after that, the next day, I went and printed up annulment paperwork because we had only been married about a month and a half at this point. So I just was like, I just wanted this to go away. Like, this never happened. I present the paperwork to him, not realizing the level of crazy that I was married to. So he naturally, as an abuser, threatened me more in a if I can't have you, no one can type of a way. But having my own life threatened honestly really wasn't that big of a deal for me because I'm a resourceful person. I knew that if I needed to, I could take all my personal documents, everything I needed, go to school or go to work one day and just disappear, and he wouldn't find me again. So I wasn't too concerned about that. What was the bigger issue is that he kept iterating that if I left, he would kill himself. And even if you hate someone, you never want to feel like you're the cause of their death. You just don't. And I didn't hate him. I still cared about him. I don't know if I could say that I loved him anymore, but I still definitely cared about him as a human being. We still were friends and had that connection, right? I couldn't do it. I couldn't feel like if I left and he committed suicide, I don't think I could have lived with that. And I didn't have anyone else to talk to try to be a support system or a resource to tell me that's crazy. So I just threw that annulment paperwork away, and that was the end of that. And things proceeded to get so much worse. I didn't know. So really, if you've been following this story since the beginning, things, start to subtly not be okay. I become isolated, kind of wrapped up, lost in this bubble, losing touch with reality. And then by the time that I realize that I need to get out, I'm in it. And I'm in survival mode. And I'm afraid kind of for myself, just on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to be yelled at, and I'm afraid for him and his life, and it's a mess. But I was able to leave. So I will tell you guys how I did that in part 4. So I will catch you guys next time.